Hello, welcome back to another SwansCast match preview. The international break is heading to an end. I think there might be a couple of more games while we're recording this on Wednesday, but I don't think anything for England or Wales. Nothing too relevant to us on this podcast. So I'm joined this week by Connor from the Pink Gun to discuss this weekend's Swansea City return to league action against Norwich City. So welcome, Connor.
Thank you for having me, Luke. Really great to be back on.
Yeah, thanks for coming back on. So I just want to kind of get on to a little bit about the end of last season. Not really in that much detail. I just want to kind of touch on how your season went, and then kind of talk about the season so far ahead of this game and what we're expecting going into this one. So before we get into that, can you just kind of remind everyone where to find you at the Pink Gun and what you do and what sort of content they can maybe go and check out if they do want to have a look at some of Norwich's sides before this game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's quite funny because I think people from different clubs maybe don't understand Norwich wear yellow and green. Why are you the Pink Un? And maybe there's a lot of history around it. Essentially, we are the local newspaper. So I work for the Eastern Daily Press, Norwich Evening News here in Norfolk, covering Norwich City. And the Pink Un is basically the sports section, and that historically was printed on pink pages, and thus there is the name. But yeah, we cover Norwich City home and away every season, every game. Every kick really. So that's what we do, and we're on podcasts, videos, written. So yeah, pinkun.com is our main hub. That's where you can find everything.
So yeah, you can go check out anything ahead of this match there to see what the enemy or the opposition is kind of talking about ahead of this game. But we'll get an insight from Connor now. So first of all, I just want to touch on last season compared to maybe what you expected for the year. How did the season go, and was it like better or perhaps worse than maybe what you expected?
Oh, blimey, yeah, it's a really difficult answer to unpack, because I think, again, from the outside, people will look at it and go, Norwich finished sixth, successful season, and they would be right. It was a successful season given all of the context around it, but there was always, I think, a discontent bubbling under from supporters around playing style, around David Wagner and his approach and the way that he led the football club. Some just sort of strategic decisions that the club took under the former sporting director Stuart Webber to head down a route of more experienced players. At the peak last season, they had 11 players over 30. It didn't really feel like a squad that was being built for the long term. It didn't really feel like there was a strategy or a story or anything like that to get behind, really. So it was quite fractious for large parts of the season. They were 17th in November, and then they went on an incredible run thereafter to get themselves into the playoffs, where eventually they got absolutely crushed by Leeds. And within that context, there's been sort of changes at ownership level. There's been a change of sporting director, a change now, obviously, of head coach as well. So, yeah, it's been frantic. It's been frenetic. And actually, the last sort of couple of weeks is probably the first time for a period of time at Norwich City where it's felt a little bit settled. So that's probably welcome. And, last season is one that I think probably we can split and say outcome good, substance probably less so.
Yeah, I think from my memory, I think I expected a good season from you. Obviously, recent Premier League still benefiting from that a little bit, and expected to be one of the challengers, but times in the season it didn't look like that was the case. I know you've recovered well to get to that position, but even I think one of our first early victories at home was against yourselves, where we maybe weren't expecting it. It was probably one of our better performances under Michael Duff. And yeah, it was just like, couldn't really put my finger on where you were, but I guess with that extra context behind that you just described, it does make sense perhaps of what was going on there and what we saw in terms of the table. Going into the summer then, you've already mentioned a couple of changes. Have you got anything notable that you want to discuss in regards to mainly the playing squad or the club that, and you said the manager's changed. So that you think will come into this season and make it a little bit better for you?
Yeah, I think the head coach is the big one. That is always the change I think that people look at as being the major one, and that's come with a major shift in strategy more widely from a club perspective. They've sort of moved away from that experience and back towards maybe one of youth and kind of trying to build assets in terms of the playing group, and you can see that in their business. They didn't sign a single player over the age of 23. It was remarkable. Really, I think it was 8 players in, 9 out, and of the 9 out included Gabriel Sara, who's one of the best, I think by common consensus, one of the best Championship players last season in terms of what he contributed, and Jonathan Rowe as well. And that whole episode sadly ended in a way that nobody really would have liked or would have wanted. So yeah, change is probably the buzzword, really. It has been a summer of change, both off the pitch and on the pitch. And Norwich probably, as I said, this really is the first game. Okay, yes, after Coventry, the transfer window had been closed, but this is the first period that Johannes Ottorup has had really to work with a settled group, a group that doesn't have players who perhaps are unhappy or putting in transfer requests or pulling out of matchday squads as we had in the first few weeks of the season. So yeah, all of that has probably contributed to just a little bit of feeling of transition at the moment at Norwich City, and that has probably dampened expectations significantly. I don't think there's the same expectation for Norwich to get top 6 this season, because there's a recognition that actually some building blocks need to be put in place and whatnot. But I think if you'd have told Norwich fans at the start of the summer that they'd lose Gabriel Sara and Jonathan Rowe, I think there would have been quite a little bit of concern about what that means on the pitch. But actually the mood is substantially different, particularly after that win against Coventry before the international break.
Yeah, I was going to say the win against Coventry, picking up the first league victory of the season. Other than that, there's been 2 draws and a defeat. I think opening day of the season against Oxford, a little bit of a shock maybe. But if you mentioned some of that discontent in the squad, again, some context that the wider football fan might not have been aware of, it does look like a bit more stability since. You've got 2 draws, Blackburn and Sheffield United. So not really awful results. And especially the Sheffield United one, I think that's positive. And then ending off with a win against Coventry. Do you think maybe the form is shifting in the right direction going into this game now, heading down to Swansea?
Yeah, definitely. Not just results either, and not just form. I think performances. That's what I think you tend to look for in the early part of the season, where we don't really have the stress of looking at league tables and various permutations, and maybe you don't even really know the quality of the teams you're playing respective to the rest of the division, with maybe the acceptance of Sheffield, with the exception, Sheffield United, who I think we all expect and anticipate to be towards the top of the division. So the fact that week on week, actually, from that Oxford game, which was completely derailed by Johnny Rowe and that whole saga, the Blackburn game, the Sheffield United game, the Coventry game, I think Norwich fans have seen week on week improvement in terms of that new style of play, which is very possession based, all about control of the football, quite similar to maybe what Swansea try to do under Luke Williams in that regard. But yeah, there is a feeling that there is now something building, and they're still lacking. I think in some areas they're not as creative maybe as you would like them to be at this stage. They're not producing the number of opportunities. But when you have a striker like Josh Sargent, in truth, you don't need to, because he is so prolific at this level that you back him to score with real conviction. So there's still elements that Norwich need to work on. I think prior to that Coventry game, most people would have highlighted the defence as looking a little bit wobbly as well in certain situations, and they conceded some really poor goals, particularly against Blackburn and Oxford. But yeah, there is a feeling now that they are in a good way, and that the wheels are beginning to move into motion. And of course, I think probably everyone looked at it after Coventry and were feeling a little bit frustrated, actually, that there was an international break, because all of that momentum and all of that good mood around the place has sort of been allowed just to not evaporate, because it's still there, but it's just been allowed to sort of prolong rather than go in and being able to use that in a game 2 or 3 days later. So yeah, Norwich will arrive in Wales positive, and with a feeling of growth, I think, in their team week on week, but with a recognition that they're probably not quite where they need to be at this moment in time in order to really climb the league in the way that perhaps they would like.
Yeah, you mentioned the international break. I think they always come at the worst times when you don't want them to, don't they, when you're doing well. I think it was probably a good one for us. I think we didn't have the best couple of fixtures going into it. A game against Cardiff, we went up and didn't end up winning, so that's a little bit one that hits, doesn't hit the fans too well when you don't beat your rival. But yeah, not a very good game against West Brom as well. Probably the result, not awful on paper, but I think we're having quite similar problems to what you just discussed in regards to playing this style of football, not really creating enough chances is the big one. And then when we do not have the ball, is the defence good enough when maybe transitioning or just when we're up against attacks? I think sometimes when you have high possession, it masks the fact that you're defending maybe isn't where it should be, because if you've got more of the ball, you're generally defending less. So I always think it's quite alarming when you're seeing numbers like 70% possession, but then our opposition is creating twice as many chances as you and then scoring more goals because they're doing it with like half as much of the ball and they're creating twice as much chances. The numbers there are just not in your favour, and I think you should definitely be doing more with it. But that's us. So I guess we'll both see a bit of it maybe going into this weekend. And you have touched on the style of play. I was going to ask you about the style of play. So is there anything, other than it being a possession-based system, is there anything for us to be looking out for?
Yeah, it's very different. I think and I think it's like food, isn't it, or music or whatever. I think we all have different tastes in terms of what we like to see our football team produce. I wasn't the biggest fan of what David Wagner was trying to do last season, which was it felt a lot more off the cuff and was based around, Norwich played a 4-4-2. They were quite direct. It wasn't really my cup of tea. This is a little bit more intricate. It's a lot more sort of structural. Again, I would compare it a lot to maybe what Swansea fans like to see from their side. I think it's very similar. Norwich create either a 3-2-5 or a 2-3-5, depending on the situation, and they try and build up from the back. And it's about trying to it's keeping the ball and dominate games with the ball, but equally it's about converting that possession into real chances, and that's the bit probably that they're still looking to build up at this moment in time. They've got really good creative players, albeit they've lacked a little bit on the right hand side since Johnny Rose departed. Kay Gordon, who has come in from Liverpool on loan, I think there's a hope that he can offer a slightly different dimension on that side. We've not seen him yet, so we'll see, and he's had quite a long injury layoff. But yeah, it's a real structural, intricate, possession-based style of play, and that is, not. I think you've seen this within some of the players. It's not something that comes naturally to some of them, and you can almost sit here and see the cogs whirring as they try and work out exactly where they need to move the ball and what position they need to be in at a certain time. And all of that means, when it's so structural and it's so heavily devised, that it takes a lot of time to really get in and flourishing, as you guys are all too familiar. So yeah, it's again, it's looking at performances and looking at that growth week on week, and the fact that they have been able to show that. And don't get me wrong, I don't think they've been, barring Oxford, absolutely horrendous defensively, but there's been some question marks about them. That clean sheet at Coventry was massive, and you hope now that they can really use that as a foundation. But for me, it's about connecting now that top end of the pitch and converting this possession that they're having into real opportunities. Like you say, I think what you've mapped out there will be very familiar to Norwich fans at the moment, and if they can do that, then I think this will be an excitement that really creates. And if I'm honest, I think the feeling that Norwich fans have at the moment is that this feels a lot like year one under Daniel Farke. He had a season before that epic title-winning campaign where you could see what he was trying to do. You could see almost the skeleton, but it didn't quite have, the muscles and all of the various elements on it to really make it or make them into a firepower. So yeah, structurally it's a really interesting one, and I think this is going to be a really interesting game actually, because it's two teams who want the ball and want to play with the ball. And so it's going to be interesting to see kind of who wins that battle in terms of that control with the football.
Yeah, no, I agree. For us, like as the home team, I think, we've been trying to transition to this way longer. I say transition. We obviously did for a long time under Russell Martin, had that brief spell under Duff where we didn't do it like this. That lasted like 4 or 5 months. And then they've gone back to Luke Williams now since January this year. So you could say we're ahead on the conveyor belt of trying to change the style. So I guess as the home team as well, you'd like to expect that we implement it better. So it'll be interesting to see if that's the case. I know player and personnel is going to have an impact on that, but I don't know if it's a good look for Luke Williams or what he's trying to do. If he kind of gets one done over on him with a very similar system that's been in place for a lot shorter amount of time. But we'll have to wait and see how that goes, of course. Looking at Swansea's team then, do you have anyone that worries you in particular that could do some damage against Norwich?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always really like Swansea in terms of the way that they play, in terms of what they try and do as a side. I thought you looked very good at Carrow Road actually towards the back end of last season, again against a team, one of the few teams this year that have come to Carrow Road and taken anything. Norwich are 20 games unbeaten there. So yeah, I mean Matt Grimes, I think is the obvious one, isn't he? He's the one that everyone looks at. I've always liked Ben Cabango. I like Ronald as well, from sort of the various little bits I've seen of him on the right hand side. He looks really encouraging, and yeah, I think those are the ones that probably stand out to me as I sort of look through the squad. But equally, you know, as I'm sure you guys have, a lot of unknowns about that as well. And then it's about how quickly and how well they adapt. But Luke Williams as a coach is someone that I admire, to someone that I like, and I followed a lot of his. I've got a mate who was at Notts County for a period of time under Luke, and always speaks very highly of what he was trying to do there and what he was trying to implement there. And it wasn't always the most defensively sound. I think that's probably fair to say, but yeah, the style of play was entertaining, and it was something the fans could get behind. And I know that he had a lot of admirers at Norwich City, actually, because they sent a young player called Jaden Warner was going to go on loan to Notts County in January under Luke, and then Luke left. He ended up going anyway, but it wasn't quite the loan spell that perhaps it could have been if Luke would have remained at the club. So yeah, I really like what he's trying to do, and I think there are some dangerous players with real potential to hurt Norwich on Saturday. But again, it goes back to that core, doesn't it? That feeling of who is going to be able to wrestle control of this game, and whoever does that probably feels like they've got a better chance of winning it, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. We have got some dangerous players. We haven't perhaps got the most out of them at the moment. You know, Luke Williams came in and said we was going to score more goals, really, than what we've been used to in regards to playing this style of football, maybe like under Russell Martin, for example. I'm wondering whether, because we haven't quite seen that yet, the same sort of explosive fireworks going forward that he had at Notts County, even though they conceded a lot, they were kind of like, we're going to score more than you. We haven't seen that. And I'm wondering whether he's been looking at trying to balance it a bit more in terms of the defence compared to what he had at Notts County, because obviously that was one of the big Achilles heels, and you just haven't got the balance right in regards to then us going the other end. At least this season, definitely. I know when we went to your place at the end of last season, we had quite a good game there as well. But for whatever reason, going forward at the moment, it's not quite clicking. But you've got to give it time. There's been a few new players, and hopefully international break now, they can work something out. If I flip that question on its head then, who is the key player that Norwich will be looking to for a bit of inspiration? Who should Swansea fans be worried about doing some damage?
Yeah, I think there's a few interesting answers to that question. I think from an attacking perspective, it's Josh Sargent. I think in terms of where he's at, there's a feeling at Norwich, and look, I don't know if it's the championship wide feeling, because you'd have to take a poll for that, but definitely at Norwich they feel he's the best striker in the championship. There is, however, a little bit of a question mark over his fitness heading into this weekend. He's been away with the USA, and he actually missed their game overnight Wednesday as we record this against New Zealand with what's being described in the US as slight ankle irritation, which is always a little bit of a concern to Norwich fans, because he's had issues with his ankles throughout the last couple of years, really. So that's not the best news heading into the weekend, and they are a little bit light in striking areas. The next option would be Ante Siernax, who they signed from Poland for 8.5 million, but he's only 20, still very young. There's a rawness to him. We haven't quite seen him as a striker yet. So Sargent's the big one. Borja Sainz as well, I think, in terms of his press and his ability and his creativity, is one that can really hurt teams. And Amankwa Forson is another one I've thrown. Their new summer signing that they signed from Red Bull Salzburg. I think, again, sort of seen a mix of things with him. For example, against Sheffield United, there was a brilliant deft touch to put Sargent through to give Norwich the lead, but equally he gave the ball away in the build up to Sheffield United's equaliser. So that probably shows where he's at the moment in terms of his acclimatisation. But there's a very talented, exciting footballer, providing Norwich can get him on the ball in the right areas. Defensively as well, I think probably the most impressive Norwich City performer at the moment has been Callum Doyle, who they signed on loan from Manchester City. He's really unique, I would say, because he I think, and you guys will know this maybe better than anyone in the Championship, when you have ball playing centre back, sometimes you can just have a little bit of loss in terms of their defensive side, and that not commitment, that's the wrong word, but maybe that aggression, and that doesn't quite come through in the right way always necessarily. He's a little bit of a throwback because he's quite happy to crunch someone, and then he'll play a line splitting pass that gets Norwich up the pitch. So real nice blend. I think the fact he's 20 is really scary. So he's been really impressive, and yeah, I could list a whole host of players, but I'll limit it to those four for now. I think those are the ones that probably at the start of the season have started in the best way.
A couple of names to watch out for then for the Swans fans heading down to the stadium. this weekend. Okay, that's just about it really for the video, but I do like to end on one a little bit more of a novelty question, not really related so much to this game, but it's not really that novelty, to be honest. It's just a case of, what is your favourite or best ever away day that you've ever been on?
Oh, that's a good question. I think probably anyone that involved winning at Portman Road, I would say, is up there. And I haven't actually seen Norwich lose at Portman or lose to Ipswich really since I was 9, so I'm quite fortunate. But yeah, I'd have to say one of those ones. There was one there where James Maddison scored the winner, so I'm probably leaning towards that one as being my best away day, because as you guys know, when you've got a fierce rivalry like that, when you can taste victory, particularly when it's on their home turf, it's one of the best feelings in football.
I bet that promotion last season wasn't the most well taken thing then.
We don't talk about that, but equally, I'm okay with not playing Ipswich, because I'm not a massive fan of derby days. So
it's just stressful, isn't it?
It is, and equally, as you guys know, the Premier League isn't the dream ride that perhaps it gets portrayed to be at points. So I'm quite happy to let them go and experience that for a year, maybe more, and see how they find it. Good luck to them.
Yeah, we had a decent run, like 7 years, but when it got towards the end and you just kind of staying afloat, it gets a little bit like same thing every year, and eventually you're just going down the trapdoor. So yeah, I understand what you're saying there. So yeah, we'll see how they get on this year. Fair play if they stay up. I think it's even trickier for the new teams these days to actually stay in that league, and it's getting harder and harder with the gulf of money and all the rest of it. So that's another conversation. Thank you very much, Connor, for coming on the channel again. If you can just remind everyone where they can find the pink gun and what they can expect when they go looking.
Yeah, it's at Pinken with all the latest Norwich City news. That's on X, by the way. Pinken.com is our website. And yeah, just all the latest Norwich City news, views, and and coverage. And we'll be there at the stadium on Saturday, sort of covering every kick. So I'm really looking forward to that. I always enjoy, albeit they're very long trips, they're always pretty enjoyable trips to Swansea. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Well, have a safe journey. Not so much best of luck, but best of luck for the rest of the season after Saturday. But yeah, nice to speak to you, and I'll hopefully chat to you later in the year again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you.